I've got some questions for Sharon on those research numbers before we widen it out to the rest of the panel. And they've moved now, so I can't see them. That's sneaky. But if anybody else wants to come in and ask a question as we go, please indicate and I'll call you. You don't have to wait to ask a question towards the end if you want to clarify something or make a point earlier. Just on those figures, Sharon, you said that the 68% of people have changed their behaviour in the period in question, so since 2008.
Yeah, we said in recent years,
yes.
So it's broad.
Yeah, but you also said earlier that the implication was that people aren't going to be changing their spending behaviour, looking at the other figures you've got. So when I look at the figures, it looks to me wholly explicable, the increase in domestic holidays, by the financial crisis and recession. We know that overseas travel, and particularly business travel, went off a cliff at the end of 2008, beginning of 2009. So in the slide you showed, there was a sudden surge between 2008 2009 from 51 million domestic holidays, breaks, to 60 million, and a fall in the overseas. And if we look at it, then subsequently a small fall, and it looks fairly stable since. Yeah. And if you compare 2013 with 2008, there were 97 million holidays taken altogether, domestic and overseas, in 2008, and 95 million in 2013. So it's stable, and it looks absolutely as though there's just been a switch.
It looks like that on the figures look as though it's one going to another. I think what I would say is that when you look at the behaviours, if it had been a straight switch, you would have expected the same, let's say 2 million short breaks have come out of the market, that 2 million would come back in. And what we've identified in the research, both qualitatively and quantitatively, is that there's two sets of changes that have gone on. There's a set, or possibly actually three sets of changes. There are people who've done the straight switch, which is they've stopped taking the 1 or 2 week holiday abroad and they've taken that trip in the UK. There's probably some switching of overseas short breaks because they've become more expensive because of the sheer hassle of going to the airport, because there's no longer a novelty. But we did pick up in the first year of the staycation in 2010 just as many people who told us that they'd started to take additional domestic breaks, and probing on the reasons for that. It's because they wanted to. It was because there was a lot of media noise about the staycation at the time. It was the thing to do. They tried it and they had good experiences. And it also fits, I think, there's a trend as well to perhaps localism, authenticity, people wanting to discover their own back garden more. So that trend has happened as well. And the interesting thing, although, as you say, it's fairly stable, is that in total trip numbers, we've actually lost a couple of million in the market, which, when you say it quickly, doesn't sound like very much, but there are fewer holidays happening now than were happening pre-recession, because some people have cut out breaks altogether. So we're consistently picking up, 10+% who are saying, I'm not taking any holidays at all, that's how I'm saving money. And those are the people in the most disadvantaged groups. And also domestically, as I touched on, I think we are seeing a shift away from perhaps a 1 or 2 week domestic break to maybe 2 or 3 short breaks through the year. And the interesting thing there is that it's seen as a money-saving measure, because even as in those 2 or 3 breaks, you might spend as much as you would do on your 1 week. You're not blowing it all in one go, and you can control it and you can make the decision later. So that's also been lots of dynamics going on in the market.
Yes, but if I'm a journalist, so I'm looking for an easy headline. If you just broad strokes, the decisive factor is the economy and people having less money in their pockets, isn't it?
The decisive factor in 2009 was the economy.
Yeah.
But it was aided by a lot of shouting and noise about the staycation. So I think there were two factors. There've been two factors going on in parallel. One has been people have less money, and in order to save money, they've taken holidays at home. And one has been some people who don't necessarily need to save money, choosing to take more breaks at home. And probably a third dimension is people who don't actually need to save money but feel a bit guilty if they overdo it, choosing to save holidays at home as well, because there is kind of that emotional, I don't want to be too indulgent aspect of it.
Okay, you wanted to... Oh, sorry, yes. Do we need a microphone from the floor? Hang on just a second. If you could, sorry, just a second. If you could wait for the microphone and say who you are and where you're from, please. I think it's all being recorded for posterity.
Oh, I see. Ilva French. I just wondered whether you had corresponding figures for day trips and whether during this period there's been an increase in the number of day trips as people have taken time out with the family for the day rather than spending money on holidays.
We don't have the data for it because our survey only goes back to 2011, and that's kind of the middle of the recession. We picked up trends actually in both directions, that some people who've not been able to afford to take holidays are then taking more day trips or doing more locally to compensate. One of the interesting things we picked up when we did some qualitative research around a year ago was one or two people saying actually they might cut back on some of their away days to be able to take the overnights, that they were making those sorts of choices. Or even general out-of-home leisure. I'll be careful about being rude, but there was a discussion in a focus group about whether people were cutting out a couple of Saturday nights out in Slough to be able to go on an overnight break somewhere instead. I said I was going to try not to be rude, someone else laughed. But that dimension is there as well. So I think it can work in both directions, but I don't have the evidence to prove it.
Okay, I'm going to bring in other members of the panel, but I just want to ask a couple more questions, if I may, of Sharon first. Just while we're here, because the term staycation is a bit of a mystery to me, because when this came up in the US, where it derived from, it was people staying at home, not going anywhere, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then in the States, they use near vacation. Why is staycation stuck here? Meaning people going away from home.
It's probably the journalist's fault, isn't it?
It is usually.
I don't know. It was the word that got picked up in 2009 as being the word of the moment, and I suppose we've got into the habit of talking about the staycation meaning the trend towards taking more domestic holidays. But I don't think it's got a firm dictionary definition.
Okay, but I still get press releases from people saying staycation is booming, staycations are booming and the trend's growing, but your figures show of decline in staycation trips since 2009.
Since 2009 was the high water mark, and actually what I think we've got since then is it's a near flat picture. It's been up a bit and it's down a bit, but overall it's a more or less flat line.
Okay. And then you talked about consumer confidence and highlighted the fact that 50% are still very concerned about the economy, which is high, and that the discretionary thrift habit is likely to stay with us. Surely, given the other things you've said, both those things are pieces of good news for the people in this room.
I think it depends what your destination is and what your product is, because if, as the point I was making about ABs versus DEs, that for some audiences where a shortage of money has kept you at home, then that's probably good news. If you're in a destination or a product that actually traditionally relied on groups that were less well off, then not so much so, because those people are not coming back into the market. Mm-hmm. So I think it has been such a mixed bag, and I think that's been the story of the economy as well, is that it's not just been an economy that's affected the worst off in society. There are some people at the higher end as well who've had personal events happen or lost a job, who've come out of it not very well, and there might be people perhaps not so affluent, but actually if their mortgage payments have come down, they might have got through the recession okay. So it's been a really mixed bag. Yeah. But I think it does depend on destination and product. That'll switch to more ABs, more older people. Certain destinations are going to be cashing in on that. If there's less younger people and less well-off people, other businesses and other destinations are going to find that quite challenging. And I suppose that's actually always the difficulty I have when I'm talking about the national picture, that whatever I say about the national level is almost certainly not true for most people in the room.
Tim, you've been nodding vigorously, and I'm going to come to you to follow up on that, and then to you, Nick, if I may. But I just got one more question for Sharon at this moment. You haven't finished, trust me. You showed one graphic that I was interested in on household. Oh, no, sorry, one more that I was interested. I was interested in them all. The one on household final consumption expenditure and the spending on recreation and culture. And it shows the final consumption expenditure declining over this period and the spending on recreation and culture increasing. And of course, that's of interest. But it would also fit with people staying at home and spending more, because recreation and culture doesn't include restaurants and hotels spending, and it does include, audio, visual stuff, IT, games, toys, hobbies, gardens, pets, games of chance, so gambling, newspapers, books, doesn't it? So people are staying at home, that's all that says.
No, I think it's saying that leisure has become more important to us as a nation. And again, this was when we did the very first set of research in 2008. One of the really interesting things was that people were seeing this economic crisis that was looming, and they were saying, if at all possible, I'm going to ring fence my holidays because my holidays are that important to me. And I think through the recession they've tried to do this, and I wasn't watching the economy in the last recession. I think I was just about finishing my finals. But the sense is that this is something that's changed over time, that kind of almost the right to have a holiday and the right to enjoy your leisure time is more important to us as a nation than ever before. And that's really what I wanted to say with this chart, is that we're not willing necessarily to make sacrifices on our fun and having a good time just because times are hard. I suspect previous recessions you wouldn't have seen that uplift there. So I think it's more a point about how we feel about our leisure and what role leisure plays in our lives, rather than necessarily people spending money on stay-at-home leisure. I think it's just they were willing to spend more and put more of their household finances into enjoying themselves. And I'm not sure that would have been true in previous recessions.
I'm going to come back to you on that, because I know something about the outbound market, and in previous recessions, outbound holidays have barely dipped at all. There's been a small dip in the worst of the recessions, but basically you've seen continual growth in outbound holidays through the last 3-4 decades, and this is the first time. It's unprecedented, the fall of about 25% actually annually in outbound holidays since 2008. It's something we've never seen before, which is a measure of the fact that the industry has been through its Wall Street crash moment for the first time in its history. But anyway, sorry, I'll let you come back on that and tell me I'm wrong. Tim, you were nodding vigorously.
Well, I think you can see the shifts, and it's great to see the up-to-date stats, and the cities are benefiting. But I think in Birmingham, you would see it as flatlining because we've had more business tourists, and that's where we've had a real hit on companies not, executives not staying away. So to get the leisure visitors, we still haven't got enough leisure visitors coming in to compensate for the drop in business visitors, and that through the recession, for some reason, we've built 26 new hotels in Birmingham, adding 3,500 new bedrooms in the city. So in the time of downturn, we've actually been increasing our room stock at an alarming rate, really. And you're trying to also fill all those bedrooms to at least the same level of occupancy as everybody else. So it's taken a lot of people to actually come up with, this, I think this point where the stat it's not a straight swap, I would support, because there is other factors at play when you interrogate down the data, that our leisure visitors have gone through the roof, but we've also had these business visitors dropping off, and day visitors have dropped off. So we've had less day visitors into Birmingham.
And the leisure visitors, what are they doing in Birmingham?
Shopping, canal, restaurants, eating out, a lot of that cultural side of things, and I suppose just spending time in a different place. And
why is the increase in hotel rooms alarming then?
Because if it gets out of kilter, to maintain that on momentum, and also you've got to keep a room rate, an average room rate going, that will enable those hotels to make a profit, to enable them to refurbish and to maintain those standards. Or in 5 or 6 years, if we don't address the occupancy and room rate balance, we won't have those hotels refurbishing, and we'll have poor stock. And that'll affect then our credibility in the marketplace and ability to attract an audience.
And what's happening with the average room rate at the moment?
It's plateaued.
Since when?
Since we're still at the recession level.
And when did this boom in hotel rooms coming on start? I mean, did hoteliers see the staycation stories in the media and then start adding?
They saw a government grant to convert empty office buildings because nobody was working in any offices. And so the government created a grant. So hotel operators saw, which are largely in cities, are largely property developers. So you've got a different mix to who owns a hotel in a city is probably a property developer who then engages a management company to manage that property because they've got no experience in the visitor economy, who will then talk them into aligning with a brand because the brands don't own anything anymore, or very few of them. Marriott is probably one of the few that owns every property that it has, but the others don't. And so you've got a big food chain of people trying to get something out of that market as well.
Sorry, so I'm just looking for an easy headline again.
Yeah.
So are government grants stimulating the staycation phenomenon to a point?
They've stimulated the hotel
Yes.
growth.
Yeah, but if the
That
rooms are
doesn't
available and it's a good price, people think, oh, I could afford to go there.
Yeah, to a part, to some extent, yes. And local authorities, although they've, as a destination, I will give a local authority, or my local authority, a bad press about how much he's putting into marketing. It has put a lot of money into the infrastructure. So, the museum's opened 2 new galleries. We've had a new park built. We've had a 194 million library. We've had a lot of infrastructure built through that recession period as well. So cities have probably not seen the slow slowdown in growth as a destination that maybe a seaside resort or a more rural area has seen, where that infrastructure hasn't been put in.
Okay. Nick, if you can remember what you wanted to say sort of 20 minutes ago, please.
I can, because it's something I'm passionate about, and you actually raised it yourself there, Ian. Personally, I'm sitting at the end so I can make a quick escape, but I hate the word staycation. I just hate it.
Oh,
passionately.
bless you.
I think it has, as you said, it has gone completely distorted from its original meaning, which was staying at home and taking day trips. And I think what is particularly galling for those of us that operate in the UK destination is that it's become a second tier. A holiday is something you can take when you afford it. You can afford it, and you stay in the UK when you can't, which is clearly nonsense. That's not the conversations that people have around their dinner tables on Saturday night. They say, where should we go in October half term? Should we do the Lake District or Tuscany or Paris? Or people don't think I am either a staycationer or I'm a holiday maker. And I think the point I was nodding vigorously at was that our customer research certainly supports Sharon's hypothesis that whilst the trend looks like it's flat, there is some very different trends behind that, and we have seen exactly what you suggested, that there were people in 2009 that did. It looked like find a holiday in the UK more attractive because it was a neutral exchange rate. Exchange rate wasn't favourable to go abroad at the time. Then that continued through 2010, perhaps with the ash crisis, and it enhanced security measures, and people thinking going abroad is a bit of a hassle. So 9-10 was certainly, I think, driven by those factors. But the economy is very important, but not for the reasons you'd think. It's not because, we're in a recession, so I'm going to stay in the UK because I can't afford to go abroad. Because most of our holidays, certainly our research says this, are not main holidays. They're not people switching from abroad to the UK. They're additional holidays. So, it can be very vulnerable to a poor economy in a recession as well, because people may still take their long-haul holiday, they may still take their ski holiday, they may still take their city break. Maybe it's their cottage break or their UK city break that falls off one year. The next year it may be the overseas city break. So, of course, the economy is important, but I think not necessarily for the reasons that you automatically think.
You, sir, you had a question. Can we get a microphone to this?
David Curtis Brignall, former hotel developer. Don't really want to have an argument with one of my co-board members of the Tourism Society. Can I just assure everybody that hotels companies do not develop hotels because of government grants. I think what Tim was referring to was a scheme which operated in very few destinations, but to key cities. To answer a question about why hotel bedrooms were being built during the recession, we actually got quite busy at the beginning of the recession because it takes you about 4 years to build a hotel. By the time you've got your finance in place, your development, or your developer, your funding, and then it takes 22 months to build a 200-bedroom hotel, if it's a good site, easy site. So people were building hotels during the recession, so they were open when we came out of it. So that's the reason. A lot of hotel companies still do own their own hotels, but you're right about the management companies. What actually happens too is that when new hotels go into a destination, the rubbish drops out the bottom. So you're actually improving the quality of the product overall, because some of the accommodation which was only being used because it was available and it was the only stuff there tends to get wiped out by the new competition, higher standards. So that's sort of my quick thing on hotel development. I actually wanted to ask Nick and Robert a quick question about length of stay and wondering whether you really see any difference trend-wise in terms of week-long holidays and short breaks. And that was my question to both of them.
Well, if you want to pick that up, but if you'd have to have a very good question to come in again, because you just destroyed my story. So, Nick or Robert, which of you wants to answer that first?
I'll very quickly say, yes, we have seen shorter durations becoming more frequent. If I'm honest, I'm not sure that that's because of a genuine consumer power or consumer trend, or if it's because of the product owners and the actual property owners being more flexible and recognising that there's yield opportunities if they do that, and we've managed that quite carefully. So yes, shorter durations are becoming more popular, and I think it's partly the point that one of the points Sharon made as well, that and in line with what I was saying earlier, people want to get away in the UK, so they're taking 2 or 3 breaks rather than one longer.
Yes, people are taking more short breaks, but not, certainly in camping and caravanning, not at the expense of longer breaks. People are still taking the summer breaks, but we're noticing that we've got much higher occupancy weekends, particularly on sites that are close to urban areas, which is driven by people trying to find what I call their nearest faraway place that they can drive to in a short period of time, pitch up and enjoy the weekend, and then head back home again. So that's my take on that. My take on a couple of other things, if I might, that have been raised. Recession. Going back to an economic understanding of recession, whenever politicians start saying we're entering a recession, at the Camping and Caravanning Club, our faces light up, because we know we're going to look forward to good times ahead. And certainly at the start of this recession, in 2009, 10 and 10, 11, we had our 2 best years ever. Our member recruitment went through the roof. We were hugely overspent on our stationery budgets because of all the magazines we were printing and membership packs were sending out. And we had much higher occupancy on the sites. But economically, recessions normally last 18 months to 2 years. And we realised as we got into 2011 that this was a recession that was going to take longer. And what does anybody know about what happens to particular industries, to people's habits in a longer recession? The answer was nobody, unless people were around in the 1930s and could recall exactly what happened in the 30s. And can you relate the 30s to the noughties anyway? Probably not. So what did happen, and now I shall enter the staycation word debate. What happened, we hit 2012, and the staycation, whether or not you like the word, turned into what we call the homecation, which was people actually staying at home. And there were a number of reasons for that. One was the distractions. Jubilee, Olympics, Paralympics, European football. Now, all of those things, people either went to to watch and join in, or they stayed at home and watched them on their 42-inch flat screen TVs. And certainly in our business, 42-inch flat screen TVs and caravans and tents are pretty mutually exclusive. The other thing that 2012 did was it poured with rain. And therefore the homecation, as well as all the distractions, was, we know from asking our members, people's response to, shall I pay money to watch the rain come down somewhere else? Or shall I stay at home, save my money and watch the rain come down? And they stayed at home. Yeah. And 2012, for us, was a disaster. And to put some magnitude on it, 2012 was a bigger disaster than foot and mouth in 2001.
Great.
And that is a fact. We had more events cancelled. We saw a bigger downturn. It was harder to get out of, and it took some real work to dig out of 2012. So we now have moved away from homecation. People are going out again, and it's started to come back. Is it going to stay the staycation? Well, I think what drives the staycation as well as recession is uncertainty. And uncertainty is still around. What's going to happen to interest rates? Another big uncertainty was Scotland. Is that resolved? No. You know, okay, we know yes or no, but what happens from here? Who knows? So there's a lot of uncertainty around, and I think as long as there's uncertainty, then people will be driven by that uncertainty to make decisions. Finally, I don't think that staycation is because a lack of money. I think a lot of people are holidaying in the UK now out of choice. Back in 2009-10, I think it was James Beresford, actually put out a challenge to the industry. People are going to stay at home. They're not going to travel abroad. You have an opportunity now in the tourism industry in the UK to give everybody a good time. And if you give them a good time now, they'll keep coming back. And I think this industry did give everybody a good time. And I think that is why a lot of people now are holidaying in the UK out of choice, not because they can't afford to go abroad.
Okay, I want to pick up on a couple of those points, but the 42-inch flat screens would fit in the spending on recreation and culture, wouldn't they, that we were talking about? Craig, Hayley, I haven't forgotten you. I can see you, sorry. But Craig, can I just ask you this then? Uncertainty and 42-inch flat screens, how have these affected your business?
I mean, our customers are independent hotels, guest houses, B&Bs, that type of accommodation. And I mean, I think the biggest change in the period we're talking about is the online availability of accommodation. I mean, not just accommodation, but there's been a massive sprouting of websites that will give you your search engine. Booking.com's gone absolutely crazy in terms of numbers of bookings. You've got TripAdvisor arranging bookings now, meta search. So the availability of accommodation from sort of mobile sites to all the types of internet availability has made the biggest difference to our customers. And probably the iPads that they bought to do the search on will also come into that budget. Because, again, it's cross-platform. They're going to lots and lots of different sites. They're viewing, if an accommodation or if a service needs to be seen, it needs to be touched in so many different places on the internet now. And that's a mobile, iPad, desktop at home, email vouchers, all sorts of things. So that, for us, that's and for our customers, that's the biggest change.
Okay.
It's the availability of accommodation.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to produce some research now, not my own, but from ABTA, you know, the Travel Association, primarily outbound, but they also deal with other aspects of tourism. And they conducted a survey of just over 2,000 adults in July and August this year, and they've just released the research because it was their convention at the weekend. And in reference to domestic holidays, their research found 24% of UK domestic holiday makers book a package, which I found extraordinary. That's travel and accommodation in a single price. And there's 10% booked with a high street travel agent, which I find extraordinary. 16% direct with a tour operator. This is the survey they conducted. But this fits much more specifically with what you've just said. They asked these 2,000 adults about how they researched and booked and so on. And the trends amongst 16 to 24-year-olds were the following, and this was obviously more online skewed than amongst older adults. 44%, they asked them what do they use to get ideas and inspiration for their holidays. 44% said social media, and 44% said a Google search or general web search, but 49% said recommendations by friends and family. Now, some of those could be through social media, I suppose, but 49% said that. 30% said travel review sites like TripAdvisor, but 37% said holiday brochures, which they picked up from travel agents. And 25% said newspapers and magazines, which is not to say that you're wrong in what you're saying, but there's more than, a bit like we talked about the staycation trend, there's more than one thing going on, isn't there? How do you respond?
Yeah, no, I mean,
Sorry, you've only just heard that. I sprang that on you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. It's massively complex. And I mean, I think the latest Google report in terms of influences on travel decisions, and also I think a TripAdvisor report is showing that social media, well, friends are still remaining right at the top, friends and family recommendations. But the TripAdvisor and that type of review site and social media is growing massively. I don't know. I mean, most of the reports I've read recently are saying that printed media is actually decreasing in its influence of the travel decision. So I don't know if that includes brochures and travel agents, but there is certainly the latest research I've seen on it suggests that a lot more of it is moving online.
I have to share this anecdote. I will bring you in, but I had to go to a Thomas Cook concept store, one of these singing, dancing stores they have, where they have iPads everywhere and so on. And these teenagers came in and sat at the iPads and then pulled brochures off the racks behind and stuck them over the iPad and leafed through the brochure, but using it as a lectern to hold it up. I'm sorry. Would you like to... Could you wait for the mic and say who you are and where you're from?